All right, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I am Gary Harper.
And I'm Colin Stanton.
Colin, again, filling in for Susan, who remains on maternity leave.
Yes, she's almost back.
Yeah.
We think. We're weeks away, we believe.
In the meantime, again, you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank
So
you.
thanks very much.
Sure.
Hey, listen, first of all, I'm very surprised that we're already into September.
I know, it seems impossible.
I just did a story yesterday on how people are already buying for Christmas.
Yeah.
Sidebar note here is I was in the neighborhood the other day, just kind of like walking around, and one of the homeowners, one of my neighbors, putting up Halloween decorations. I'm not kidding.
People have gotten really early on that. It seems like the last few years, it's gotten really early with us.
Well, it's like with everything else. It's like when you go to Costco in July, they've got costumes out.
Yes.
So, but her decorations were pretty expensive. So I think she was thinking, I'm getting my money's worth out of this,
Yeah, we've got some people in the neighborhood who really go over the top, so they need to get started early.
But think about that, all September and then all of October, and then they don't take it down the first week of November.
No.
They're going to leave that stuff up. Anyway, I digress. I did bring that up, though, because we're in September and already October is going to be next month. And as we kind of discussed earlier, I mean, that's time for open enrollment for a lot of folks.
Yeah, a time a lot of people dread.
Yeah. Are you kind of, what do you think about open enrollment? You kind of dread it in a way because you want to make sure you make the right decisions,
I think once you get to a spot where you're pretty happy with what you have, and if you still have those options open, it gets a little less daunting.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there were times where it seemed like, for us, our insurance was changing every year.
All
so we
the
had
time.
to go through a whole different process every year.
Yeah, you have to keep an eye on it. And that's a really good point that you brought up, because once you find something you like, you still have to make sure it's still there. You just don't say, well, I'm going to just leave it there and it'll go to default.
And that it still works for you.
But you got to make sure it's still there, and if it does work for you, if it's the same program and everything.
Exactly.
But it is kind of a frustrating and it's stressful because you want to make the right decisions for you and your family. So today we're talking to Kelsa Dickey. She is with Financial Fitness right here in the Valley. How are you doing today, Kelsa?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, do you have open enrollment over there at Financial Fitness?
Yeah, we do have benefits that we offer for our team members as well. And a company can sort of decide when they want to have open enrollment at their company, but it is really common. Most companies do it in the fall. So it is approaching, and that's why it is such a good conversation to have for people.
Yeah. So walk us through this. First of all, why is it so frustrating for a lot of folks when open enrollment comes? It seems like, it's a daunting task. I have to make the right decisions. What's going on with that?
Healthcare, unfortunately, in the United States is intentionally complex. It really is. There's a lot of terms that we don't understand. There's a lot of things like coinsurance versus copays versus deductibles, out-of-pocket maximums. There's so many things that people don't fully understand. And really what it boils down to is you're also trying to anticipate, what will I need for the coming year? And we don't always know that, right? So we could have a number of years in a row where we're really healthy, and then all of a sudden a year where something changes. And so you're managing what always has been, what you've always needed, with sort of the worst case scenario, but what if, right? And so there's just this big gray area when it comes to it. And it's really complex. And oftentimes we don't know who to go to ask questions or where to get the right information. And so that's why I'm really glad that we're talking about it.
So what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to open enrollment? What are some of the things that you should really keep in mind when you're looking at the paperwork and deciding what to do?
Yeah, a number of things. Number one is realize the importance of the decision you're making. So yes, it's annoying and it's cumbersome and it can be overly complex, but really important is you're talking about the care of your health, right? That's really what your health insurance is. And so you really want to consider in the coming year, whatever is going to give you the ability to care for your health the best, whether that's your mental health. So do you need a policy that really does cover therapy or that kind of thing? Do you want flexibility where you can go to any doctor and any specialist you want? Or do you want to keep it with like the same primary care doctor you've always had? But number one is remind yourself of how important this decision is, even though it's overwhelming or annoying and kind of falls at sometimes the worst time of year with it being in the fall, around holiday season. And like you were saying, people are already starting to think about the holidays, right? They're already decorating and shopping for the holidays. And then there's this other element of life added into it as well. So number one is just realize the importance of it. Number two is don't try to make a quick decision. So lean on other people. So use your benefits manager if you have one at your work. Usually this is somebody in the HR department. But also don't be afraid to call the insurance company. It is their job to really understand their policies as best as possible so they can break those down for you. You can ask very specific questions. Here's the type of prescription that I get filled. Here's the type of doctors I go to. Here's the types of, whether I use physical therapy or those types of things. Here's the kinds of procedures I might want to have done in the coming year, and let the company help you, but lean on those resources so that you're not trying to make this decision all on your own. There are those resources out there. Another mistake that I would avoid is oftentimes what you're going to get from your employer is a really colorful handbook of some sort. It's got, graphics and images and, all that kind of stuff. And it's got really great language in it. This is a marketing document by the insurance company. Okay. So you kind of want to go one step further and get what is often the most boring document you've ever seen, which is typically a handbook that includes all of your, all the details of the policies that you have available to you. It's a lot more thick, but it's going to break down in more detail besides just the marketing flyer that you're going to get typically emailed to you by your HR department. Yeah, so I would go a little bit further than that.
Yeah, I remember the when they used to come out with the pamphlets and the folders. They were very fancy, very thick, colorful, glossy. Yeah, you're like, wow, this is going to be
this is where my money's going.
This is where my money's going. Yeah.
It seems like one of the first decisions you have to make is, do you go high cost where it seems to cover everything, or do you save a little money but go high deductible and take a little risk? Is there any sort of good rule of thumb as to who should be picking which? How should I know which one's better for me, or is it just strictly risk tolerance?
Risk tolerance is one, also your cash position. So if you have a high deductible plan because you want to save a little bit money on your monthly premium. So the premium is what you pay out of your paycheck, right? So that's what you pay for the policy. And then your deductible is what you pay for out of your pocket before your insurance really covers anything and really kicks in, okay? So typically those two things happen in inverse. So if you have a high deductible, you're going to have a lower premium and vice versa. The idea is that you're going to pay either way, right? So if you're typically healthy, you can probably go for a policy where you have a higher deductible. My recommendation, if you do that, is if you're financially able to, put the difference from the cheapest policy to maybe the more high-end premium policy, put that difference in premium into a savings account. So that way you're ready in order to cover the deductible should you need to. One mistake people make is going for the cheapest policy possible, but it ends up costing you in the long run, right? So either co-pays or co-insurance. And a big part of that really does come down to risk, or just being realistic with yourself or being honest with yourself about the types of medical care that you really want to have in the coming year.
How important is it to look at last year's medical appointments and medical receipts and hospital visits to make a decision with the next coming year when it comes to choosing insurance?
It's especially important if things are staying the same. So if you're not having sort of an anomaly of a year, let's say this is the year that, like you were saying, you have somebody on maternity leave. If that's the year where you're having a baby or something like that, really what you did in the past year doesn't matter. It's a little irrelevant, right? But if everything is going smoothly, you've got the doctor you like, things are going smoothly, with your health, you like the providers that you have found, then chances are it's important to look at what you've done and just make sure that the things you want to keep doing are covered by the new policy. Just like you guys were saying at the top of the episode, if some employers sort of change their policies every single year, and I mean dramatically change them, where it's like all brand new policies, none of them are the same. And other ones they try to stay as consistent as possible. So they'll have two policies that are similar to the year before, and then maybe one type of new policy or one policy that changes compared to the prior year. So it's really important if you're experiencing changes in your health or the employer is experiencing changes in what they're providing.
You talked about the importance of the savings account, particularly with the high deductible. So could you explain the difference between the HSA and the FSA? I know HSA, if you have the high deductible, that's typically the one you have. But what's the difference? And does it ever make sense to have both? Can you have both?
Right, great question. So flex spending account is FSA, and then health savings account is HSA. A flex spending account, just about anybody can have that regardless of what your premium is, what your deductible is, and that kind of thing. And the amount that you can contribute to an FSA is typically lower than an HSA, and it has to be used in the given year. So it's for expenses that you incur in the current year. HSA, it rolls over from one year to the next, so you don't lose the money and you can contribute more, but you are only eligible for an HSA if you have a high deductible plan. And that really only makes sense. An HSA is a great vehicle. There's a lot of tax benefits to it. There's a lot of talk around the triple tax benefits, but really you only gain those tax benefits if you keep the money in there for a long time. And that is because the contributions you put into your FSA or HSA both are deductible, right? Tax deductible. But with the HSA, you can invest the money or you can gain interest on the money while it's sitting in there, where that's typically not an option with the FSA. And any growth you have on your money is also tax-free. And then when you go to use the money, so long as you're using it on qualified medical expenses, you can also use it tax-free. So it's that triple tax benefit. But really, that triple tax benefit only makes sense if you're keeping the money in there for a number of years. I typically say like a minimum of 3 years. I also would make sure that any person with kids or with a family, that you really question the HSA, just because, kids, they get accidents, they get bumps and bruises, sports activities, all that kind of stuff. And so you are putting money in there, and that's really great if you have very low costs in a given year for your health insurance or for your health care. But then as soon as you need to start using your health insurance, remember, you've got that high deductible plan. And so it sort of eats away at the benefits of the HSA. So it's a great long-term vehicle. FSA works really well for somebody who's going to have out of pocket, and it sort of forces you to save because they're going to take the money out of your paycheck, right, and contribute to your FSA. So if you need that extra layer of accountability, if you need that discipline where they just take the money out and put it into an FSA, so you've got money if you need a copay or co-insurance or something like that, then you're good to go. The FSA works really great as well.
Also, I mean, you've got to, if you're married, you have to bring your spouse in on this just to make sure you guys are both on the same page. Hey, this is the deal. This offers XYZ and this offers ABC. I mean, you've got to make a decision together if you're going to be on that policy together.
Definitely. And that's another great point, which is check your spouse's offerings as well, because typically what happens when you're in open enrollment is that the employer pays a portion of the premium, right? So you pay something out of your paycheck and the employer pays something. It might make sense where your spouse is using their policy through their work and you are using yours through your work. And yes, you have different benefits, and that can be a little hard. Maybe you can't go to the same primary care doctor or you don't have the same network, but it could save you a lot of money. And it might be that one spouse goes on their policy and then the other spouse along with the kids go on the other policy, right? So you're going to want to compare what are the family rates, what does the employer pay for, and those types of things. That's also really important. And then the last thing I would say when it comes to another mistake to avoid is you can still consider the Affordable Care Act offering. So you can go to healthcare.gov and compare what that is offering you for a policy compared to what your employer is paying as well, or offering as well. If your employer pays for a really big portion of your premium, it's probably less expensive to go through that policy that you have at work. Absolutely. But it doesn't hurt to double check and see what the offering is through the Affordable Care Act as well at healthcare.gov.
Let's kind of transition out of insurance and go to what's called the hospital indemnity plan. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, there's a number of different ones. So it'll be policy specific, but yeah, hospital indemnity essentially pays you if you go into the hospital. So there's also accident ones where you get paid if anything happens to you. So this is not the same thing as insurance, but it pays you directly.
I think hospital indemnity plans is often overlooked, but it's one of my favorite benefits that I like to choose from because it's relatively pretty cheap. Yeah. And the payoff on the other end of it is big. I think my hospital indemnity, I don't know what I'm paying, but I think you can get like an indemnity plan for, oh gosh, it's like maybe, I don't know, $20, $10 a paycheck, something like that. And then if you or your spouse are in the hospital, they pay you whatever the policy is. It could be like $1,000 a day, and then maybe $500 a day after that. But the payoff is big. I know my wife went into the hospital a year or two ago, and we used the indemnity plan, and it was, I don't want to call it a jackpot, but it was a big sum of money that we got because I had the indemnity plan. Hey, what about other things like, say, life insurance, beneficiaries? you've really got to keep an eye on that. If you just gloss over that, then you're making a big mistake.
Yeah, I do just want to touch really quickly on the indemnity plan that you were just talking about really quickly, because one little perk of those is going to save a lot of listeners right now a lot of money, is that they don't have expiration dates oftentimes on when you can file a claim. So if you've been paying, I would say that the hospital indemnity plans that you're talking about, I love them too. And they are probably the policy that people pay for, but because they're so inexpensive, they forget about them and then they never file a claim against it. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll look at someone's paycheck and we'll say, hey, you're paying for this. Let's go over the last 2 to 3 years, or as long as you've had this policy, and let's file as many claims as we can and get a big chunk of change back. So if you've been to the hospital or if you've had something like that happen, call them up and say, hey, I haven't filed a claim. How do I do it? And what kinds of things should I be considering that I can apply for? Because you can get a big chunk of change back. So absolutely love that policy. And oftentimes, like I said, they don't have expiration dates.
Yeah, and even if you don't use it, you're not out a whole lot of money. But again, if you do use it, it's well worth it. Tell us a little bit.
The same is true for your life insurance, just like you were saying.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about life insurance, how important that is, and making sure your beneficiaries are up to speed.
Make sure every year that when you do your open enrollment, that your beneficiaries are up to speed. Absolutely. I really, life insurance through your employer, the group life insurance is another one of those where it's like, it's usually really inexpensive. It's a few bucks often per paycheck, or you can sort of add a benefit amount for a couple dollars extra per paycheck kind of thing. I do typically recommend, just as a side note, for people to have a private life insurance policy as well, maybe just a term policy. They can, speak with a life insurance broker about that. But that way, if you leave your employer and you aren't losing all of your life insurance. So you kind of want to have both. So I do recommend that, but it's an added benefit that's really inexpensive. And each year, just leave that as a reminder to double check your beneficiaries during your open enrollment period. It's typically part of your form. So when you elect it, it's going to ask you for your beneficiaries again.
As you get older, how much should you re-examine your selections? I've had the same stuff for a few years, but as you get older, should you have more of a focus on certain things and maybe less on something else?
Again, this is going to be dependent on your health changes.
Right.
So if you, start to get arthritis, or you start to add different prescriptions, or, different things like hearing aids or those types of things, then the changes to your policy, you might need more health insurance benefit, right? So things like prescription coverage might not matter to you. You might choose a policy that's like, well, it doesn't cover prescriptions, but if I get one, it's like an antibiotic once a year if I need one, sort of thing, right? So it's not that big of a deal. But if all of a sudden you're like, every month I need a heart medication or diabetes or any number of things, it can get really expensive. So it's going to be based off as your health changes. And if that's not changing a whole lot, then that's a good thing, but the policy could still be changing. So just double check that.
There is so much to digest. And again, that's one reason why you don't want to put it off. I mean, as soon as you get that glossy pamphlet in front of you, or if you get it emailed to you, you really need to start settling down and looking at your options and looking over them. I'll choose this. I mean, is that a good idea? I mean, next year I'm planning on having a baby. Like what you had said, Kelsa, you don't have a crystal ball, but there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of point yourself in the right direction. What else you got there, Colin?
I think I've covered it.
I mean, we got open enrollment coming up, so I mean, do you talk this over with your wife?
We do.
Yeah, and you have to.
Yeah, and it seems like we always go, I think what we've got's been pretty good.
Yeah. Well, and Kelsa, get the point across that once you make this decision, you can't go back and change it and go, you know what, I really don't like this high deductible plan. Can I change it? No.
Yeah, unless there's like a specific life change event, right? And they will be very specific on what you're allowed to consider a life change event or not. And it's really rare, maybe if you do have a baby or something like that. But then again, we plan for those oftentimes, right? Or we know when we select the policy that might happen during the year. But it is really important. And again, try to avoid going for the cheapest option. Try to avoid procrastinating. Give this some attention. Give this some thought. Do not be afraid to call the insurance company and say some of those things like, hey, I'm going to have a baby this year. How much would this cost me under this policy versus this policy that my employer is offering, right? Their job is to help you make those decisions. And I would say that they're going to do a better job of really explaining what something will cost you, more so than like your benefits manager at your company. They're going to be able to tell you what the document is showing them, right? But they're not going to want to give you health advice or anything like that, just, for compliance sake. And so do not hesitate to call the insurance company and speak to somebody and really ask some very specific questions. What if this happens? How much would that cost me under this policy versus this policy?
Good information, and something everybody should, just start considering with the coming up right around the corner. Hey, Kelsa Dickey, thank you for being on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to find out more about you and financial fitness, first of all, give us a brief synopsis of what financial fitness does.
Yeah, so I am a money coach. I specifically help people get control and manage their day-to-day finances. So we, don't sell investment products or insurance, but I will be able to guide you and at least point you in the right direction as to what some of those things are for you. But really the money coming into your checking account, how do you decide if you should spend it or save it? And what are those things that you should be spending and saving it on? That's really what I help my clients get control of. And you can find out more information at fiscalfitnessphx.com. Again, that's fiscal, FISCAL, fitnessphx.com.
All right, sounds really good. Thanks for being on the On Your Side podcast. Like I said before, or I have said before, you are a friend of the podcast because you've been on here a couple of times, and we always enjoy having you here. So great conversation and great tips. Thanks so much, Kelsa.
Thank you.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can't, send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock. And every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.